Kia ora koutou katoa, ko John Reid take whenua. Welcome to this edition of Water New Zealand's podcast series, Tāwara o Te Wai. I'm John Reid from Water New Zealand, and co-hosting this podcast with me today is Emily Afoa. Today we're going to talk about cultural significance and the importance of wai in the wider water industry.
People get so irked by that code word. And when I explain it to people, in my kind of opinion, it's about collective governance, collaborative governance, or same with design or management. I'm like, if you're not going to do things on behalf of the collective, who are you actually doing them for? If you're not doing things collaboratively, who are you actually doing them for? And actually, when you kind of go through these co-design projects or co-governance projects, I'm yet to see one that fails.
The water sector knows there are obligations to meet, but how do we turn these into opportunities? And with me today are Sarah Nolan and Troy Brockbank. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Kia ora, ko Sarah Nolan tuku ingoa. Mō mātanga paumua ahau mō ngā tikoni hira o Tamaki Makaurau. Kia ora, my name's Sarah. I work for Healthy Waters in the Māori Outcomes team, and it's very exciting to be here. Troy.
Kia ora kouroa, Emily, John, o te rā, tēnā tātou. He uri o hau te tai tokiro, ko te raroa, ko ngā pui, ko Ngāti Wai, ko Ngāti Hine, ko Ngāti Kaui ki iwi, he kaipukaha hau, ai, ko Troy Brockbank hau. I'm Troy, I'm a Becca, I'm Te Mana o Te Wai lead. Yeah, it's just a real privilege to be here today.
Kia ora, Sarah, Troy and Emily. Emily, over to you.
Tēnā kōrua, tēnā tātou katoa. Thanks for joining us, Troy and Sarah. It's great to have you here. It's a kaupapa that's really special to my heart. Working in water is what sparks joy in what I do. So I'm really excited to have this conversation around the cultural significance of wai. To get us going, it would be great to hear your thoughts on some of the examples that you've seen of aligning or integrating cultural values with projects, programs, services that we offer in the water industry. Sarah, did you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I always try and say, people still have such a stigma when it comes to working with mana whenua and, tangata whenua around how it could be hard or there's challenges or people are nervous, when really working with iwi is by far the best thing that you could possibly do for your project. If you want to get a better understanding, more holistic outcomes, a more well-rounded deliverable, and actually, like you said, find joy in the wai, working with mana whenua is a really, really great way to do that. Specific examples, I work for Healthy Waters, as I said earlier. We've got a program in Healthy Waters called the Wai Officers, so Stormwater Inspections Program. It's a kind of shared program with iwi and with Healthy Waters where a kaimahi is employed 50% with us in Healthy Waters and 50% still with their iwi. So they're learning, the council beasts and all the processes that go on there, but then they can actually take that back to their people and to their land, and they can maybe go through different processes a bit easier, understanding both sides. We're getting, council, we're getting amazing outcomes through that. We're getting, cultural values assessments done. We're getting an understanding of the awa that we're trying to improve, not just from, the little 10-metre reach that was working on, but actually the history of the awa and, what it used to be. And having that, I think, really improves the design principles and, all that sort of thing, as well as, iwi are actually finding it easier to not having to jump through so many hoops, I guess, when they're coming to working with their awa.
Sounds really meaningful, and part of that bridging the them and us gap of even just systems and processes that can sometimes be the barrier, even with good intention and knowledge sharing. Troy, what about yourself?
Well, I've seen a lot of change throughout my career in this. Right back at the beginning, there was nothing really. You'd go around saying kia ora to someone and they wouldn't even say kia ora back. They'd ask, what are you talking about? On projects, we wouldn't necessarily consult. We'd just inform people of what they're doing on projects. And then I've kind of seen a big shift more recently in companies being really strong in their identity, who they are. People themselves being quite strong in their identity and bringing those to projects. I've seen a lot of projects fully embrace Te Ao Māori. Still see quite a lot that don't, but I think on the majority we're tending to be more on the positive side. On the side, that's probably implementing more te mana o te wai solutions, cultural solutions and outcomes, looking at cultural impacts and looking at them quite seriously. The other thing too is actually you see a lot more tangata whenua and mana whenua-led projects these days. Those are kind of a distant dream and I guess an aspiration on the horizon. When I started as an engineer 20 years ago, one of the projects Sarah's with on the Hotio River, looking at the sedimentation, but also part of the bigger, I guess, kaipara moana remediation projects. Those things are, in my eyes, kind of not just New Zealand groundbreaking, but world groundbreaking. You've got all these different diversity of thought, all these different community-based outcomes happening, and you get really a good collective outcomes, co-design outcomes, where it be a focus on the health of people, the health of the environment, the health of water, and all of those things are kind of helping the health of that community.
I think it'd be really neat to tease that out a little bit more, both of your opinions, because I think there are amazing projects going on, and a lot of them are quite large scale, but sometimes the ability or the line items within a budget diminish pretty rapidly in proportion to the scale of the project. And so when we're talking about the cultural significance of why meaningful engagement, working with iwi and mana whenua, how do you think we as a sector can carry that through so it's a baseline of how we practice as professionals, irrespective of scale or mandate from client? Because sometimes when you've got these amazing projects that are iwi-led, we're getting more Māori professionals in the sector who are helping champion as well. But it's not from my experience, and perhaps I play in some of the smaller pools than the two of you, it's not consistent. And that's what I would love to see, where it's almost business as usual, because that just is how we operate. Do you have any thoughts on that scalability? Whoever has the strongest opinion, jump in.
I do. I've got many thoughts on this. I think of potentially, I've been in the industry now for 9 years, and I think that maybe it's just an evolution of myself, but perhaps my rose-tinted glasses have been taken off a bit recently. I think the most recent Stormwater conference, I wrote an article in the Water Journal. I was a little bit disappointed by the lack of, not projects, I think at a project level, we're just getting better and better as a country, and I think that that's really awesome, but maybe at the upper level, the governance and, the direction that we're actually getting from, whether it be central government or, other, I don't want to name names for any specific organisations, but, that's maybe at the higher levels, I think that there is a bit of a disconnect there. I think that, we might even hear the phrase, we'll meet our te tiriti obligations, and I want to be able to challenge people that say that and say, how? So what does that actually mean at an operational, practical level? Because I think that that's where the words sound great, but the actual actions and how they actually filter down to maybe my level as a, council officer, how that disconnect, I think, is happening quite a bit. Te tiriti, te mana o te wai, the direction from iwi themselves and what they want to see within their own rohe, I think really needs to be shaping the industry a lot more, rather than just having proactive programs like the wai officers or like the Hotio, where it's, very much at that project level.
I wanted to just jump in and ask, I'd be really interested in hearing about some of the sort of the small things that people can do. What are some of those proactive small things that people can try and do, or you've seen on some of the smaller projects?
It's really hard, if I'm honest. That's why I was interested in your perspectives as well, because it depends on who the client is in our experience. There's some pretty broad variation between public sector work and private sector work, and I play in both fields. Sometimes I have envy of the role that you have, Sarah, working in the council on programs like the one you're involved in, where you have that commitment from leadership to work directly and engage and co-design. That's really powerful. Sometimes we're limited by scope. So this is definitely a plug, but also true. The small pieces of work that we do at Tectus is that we made a commitment in the first iterations of the Cultural Significance of Why course that everyone in our team would do that, because we are a business who works in water. The new version, the online version, makes that even more achievable, both financially and the time commitments for our team to do that and distribute it across the work. But it means that I know our team have a base level of knowledge, of recognition of the relationship Māori have with taiao, whenua, with our natural environment. And so we can have conversations that in our office, even in projects where we're not able to directly engage, because that's not always the case with some of the private sector work that we're doing, we can set our own ethical foundation based on, yes, generic knowledge, not always applied directly, hapu, marae, like at that really super place space, but at least we have a general recognition, a foundational level of knowledge across the team.
I think it very much depends on the people you're working with. All our projects as a consultant usually come from a client. I guess these days we have a bit of an opportunity to create projects and put them forward, whether in the, having community outcomes. But most often or not, they come from the client. There's a set budget line, in your LTP or somewhere. That money's come from some type of fund, and there's a particular purpose that they're trying to achieve, especially in local government. I find myself as a consultant, sometimes you're kind of so far removed from those strategic directions and where to go. And it's not until you kind of have a tender or a bid, even if you're lucky to get sole source, where they say, we've got this project, we want you to deliver it, you've got the right skill sets, this is what it is. And if it's not in that point there where the client's identified to have some type of co-design, whether it be with a community or whether it be with tangata whenua or whoever it may be, it's really hard to kind of take that forward and actually implement good co-design solutions, especially with tangata whenua. And the reason behind that is because you're so far removed from that relationship. If you don't have that prior relationship with someone, you're kind of building it as you go. But it always comes across as, I need you for this project, and I will maybe implement your stuff, I may not. Because you've got no idea what the aspirations are sometimes. You've got no idea if you even have the budget to do it. You don't even know if it's even practically feasible within the scope that you have. So the earlier you can kind of get designers involved, you can start to build those relationships. You can start getting into a project and you know exactly what's needed. You know exactly what tangata whenua, mana whenua, what the aspirations are, what they're trying to achieve. But also you can kind of figure out, what actually is the priorities for that particular community. Is it actually on drinking water, or actually do they have a flood problem where that's the focus should really be on flood management, or actually really to be managing people in those scenarios or in their activities? Or is it around wastewater? Do we need a better system? Is it a combined system? Do they have poor discharge, or maybe they just got aging infrastructure? Some of those things you can kind of work out talking to our clients, and we do such great work as water practitioners and doing BD, going out there and talking to clients, mostly private sector and local government, but I really see people doing that with tangata whenua. I really, really see it. And sometimes, and then perhaps you look at it on the other side. If everyone was doing it, I don't even know if tangata whenua would like that either, because all their time would be eaten up. But I think that's perhaps the next genesis of being a good kaitiaki, being a good water practitioner, is trying to find out where that balance is, where we need to kind of not just have a relationship around a project, but actually kind of move it forward into a proper relationship, and then we can kind of get into some projects. But I guess as a consultant, again, on the other hand, it's hard. Time is money.
You're like speaking directly to me there. Consultant hat, also tangata whenua, and trying to build meaningful relationships outside of mahi, essentially, because there's no scope in most of the work that I do to have time to do that. So while you were chatting, I was thinking of what are some of the other small things, and I think our role as practitioners even can be those pieces of challenging scope. flagging when tangata whenua aren't in the room, asking as designers as early as possible to have conversations and not with mana whenua, and not just, sometimes you get fragmented as the design team. There's the engagement, that's been my experience anyway. You get the engagement team and you get design team over here. And I've literally had one example where I kind of got a bullet point summary of the minutes. And it's really hard to turn that into meaningful outcomes without the context around it. So I think it's an interesting space to be.
I'd say listening to this as, I guess, the council or local government person in the virtual room, it makes me actually quite sympathetic to you guys, especially as Māori practitioners that probably know, the right thing that needs to happen. But if it's not in the scope given to you by the client, which is often, council, then what say do you really have in it? And it's opening my eyes, I guess. And I do wonder if that's where there are levers that we as an industry can continue to pull. And, I understand there's reforms going on and the RMA reform and everything, but Te Mana o Te Wai is still there. And, that is still something that we need to be delivering on. It's in our legislation. There is still Te Tiriti o Waitangi. In every single of the Healthy Waters job descriptions, it says you must be delivering on Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and there are ways that it shows you how. So I don't know, maybe again this is my naivety coming back, but there are some ways that, as the consultants who might not necessarily, you don't get to have that treaty relationship and partnership that we do as the government, local government, but you can prod.
There's some councils, and Auckland Council's a great example because they've got Māori outcome strategy. Even their subsidiaries, you think about water care, they've got the Tamaki Order, again, AT used to, when they were AT. They all have these Māori outcome strategies and plans and implementation. They also got the Independent Māori Statutory Board, Te Haukura, which kind of monitors a lot of that. But then that's quite rare. You go around the rest of the country and I probably can count on my hand the amount of councils that have that Māori plan. They may have something in writing, but whether or not they're delivering it or not is something completely different. Most often, those councils, they might only have one person leading relationships, but then they may have like 200 hapu that they have to go and talk to. Some councils, Far North District, for example, they've got a good plan. Te Pai Tawhiti, from memory, they've got their plan, but then other councils, which I won't name, they're not doing it. They're full of people who don't want it to happen. I feel quite blessed, I think, being in the Tamaki region. But then when I do work in other regions, it's hard sometimes.
So we're hearing a lot about how things can be good and how things might need to improve in other places. How do you think we move from that to be a little bit more future focused, or what are things that everyone here who's listening and involved in the water industry can take away to be more just culturally aware and work out how to actually apply this in their daily work, really?
I think it's a bit of a catchphrase. We're in a great opportunity right now with all the reforms, but we genuinely are. What's going on right now is pretty unprecedented. So I think that we really need to take that opportunity and jump at it and actually be brave and do things differently. We can do big picture things, and how great would it be if we can all wear rose-colored glasses and we can all talk about how great, we don't even consult anymore. We actually just, we partner. We don't engage. I know that engagement is now probably one of the top levels that we could do, but it would be great if we didn't have to engage. It would be great if that kind of partnership was already there, that we already knew what each other wanted to do, and we could work in that mold of shared accountability, shared outcomes, co-design, co-governance. People hate that word, and I don't know why, because it's can relate in such beautiful outcomes. And what's scary about it, I don't that will never make sense to me. But I think in order to get to that beautiful picture, it really does start with each individual person, I think, educating themselves. Big picture, great, but you need all the different types of pencils and pens to be able to create it. So I think that is each person actually upskilling themselves, learning in their mahi, really practically. So it's not just the beautiful words like we were saying, but actually practically in your mahi, how can you better be delivering on these Māori outcomes? How can you better be delivering on Te Tiriti, on Te Mana o Te Wai, on Te Mauri o Te Wai? And we do need people to be brave and to step outside their comfort zone and, challenge their thinking.
I think, that co-governance thing, people get so irked by that co-word. And when I explain it to people, in my kind of opinion, it's about collective governance, collaborative governance. or same with design or management. I'm like, if you're not going to do things on behalf of the collective, who are you actually doing them for? If you're not doing things collaboratively, who are you actually doing them for? And actually, when you kind of go through these co-design projects or co-governance projects, I'm yet to see one that fails. I'm yet to see one that hasn't delivered for the community. You know, we're going to move from, 67 councils to about 40 water entities, or, give or take, including the internal units. I think that's just going to make us stronger, definitely at a regional level. In terms of what people could do better, this is a good plug. But there's this cool course out there, guys, that I helped make. The cultural significance, importance of why. It was actually a bit of a dream. When we first discussed it, Water New Zealand had all these courses, but we didn't actually have a place for a cultural lens to a course. So what we did was I kind of badgered Water New Zealand if we could do a separate one, and it didn't really work. And then left it for 6 months, and they come back and said, you know what, would be a really good idea, a course on significance, cultural significance and importance of why. And I said, yes, it would. Yes, it would. So we had this 1-day course. We ran it a few times. Then we moved it to I think it was a 6-week course. Then it extended to a 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then the more I did it, the more we kind of figured out that people just wanted to know more. And that's one of the reasons we've kind of changed the structure of this course. We kind of made the decision to actually, if we make this digital, we can have much more of a reach. The other reason too is once you start adding weeks, things start to get quite expensive, labor costs, not just for the facilitators and for those running the admin, but also those wanting to be on the course. It was actually getting quite expensive. So that's just another way. How do we make this more cost effective, but also knowledge effective as well? So it is out there. It is on the Water New Zealand website. You'll have to listen to this smooth talking voice if you want to attend it. I think it's well worth it. I am biased about it. I get no money from it, no royalties whatsoever, but I still recommend you should do it because it is fun. And I've met so many people, and everyone has had such a unique view of the world. And the course teaches you not just around Māori outcomes and the cultural significance of why from a Māori point of view. It's really about bringing out the best of your identity so you can apply your cultural identity to your projects and to those around you.
We had a neat experience in sending, well, my observation, maybe it wasn't so much an experience, but when it was the online version, sort of 8-week version, I think, we would send 2 people at a time. And so they could then discuss their experiences together. It wasn't so perhaps intimidating. And what was really neat was asking them to we did in our weekly huddle, weekly meetings, who's been doing training and getting their tidbits and what their takeaways were from the course the week prior or the session prior. And it was neat to see the team, irrespective of whether Taiwiwi or Māori, finding their own relationships with why, like the coho, that connection to water and the ability to, we had some really interesting conversations around surprise alignments in their culture and Māori culture and its relationship to the maramataka or the moon or the lunar calendar or to water bodies. And so it was a way of sparking conversation where we could find shared, I guess, themes of what was important to us as individuals that we could apply as practitioners. So maybe just from the other side of the table, I think that was one of the thoughts around how we might use the online version to still use it as a jumping point for conversation. Do either of you want to do any wrap-up final statements, or you're happy where it is as well, Sarah and Troy?
A final thought kind of reminds me of a whakatauki that goes, Ina tere te kapua he hau ki muri. There's a cloud that is kind of racing across the sky, but it's only moving because of the wind behind it. To me, it's quite relevant. Perhaps for some people, and most people perhaps, that's the start of our journey, is the water cycle before the water comes down. But it talks to us around nothing's ever going to happen unless there's something behind it kind of pushing it along. We could be the cloud, we could be the wind. We can kind of change depending on the scenario. But like Newton's law, you're only going to have action when you have an action. So this is, I guess, a challenge, talking or giving a big toe talk to Sarah in the mahi that she's doing through article, who points in this podcast around, we can say whatever we like, but you got to get out there and kind of make things happen. And then sometimes people don't want things to happen, but you can still blow. You can still be the wind.
I don't know if I have any words after that. I think that was perfect. What a nice way to end.
Thank you, Sarah and Troy, for joining Emily and myself today. It was great to talk to you about cultural significance and how we can always do something to improve our cultural understanding and approach. Thank you for listening to this latest episode. We'll be back soon with another one.